I felt obligated to do more on Purim because Purim is Tuesday, Wednesday. So I have a lot, and this stuff on Purim is mostly or virtually in English, but I felt it was really important information or good information, some of which was very new to me. So I thought, well, it's probably going to be new to you guys too. So we're going to jump right in. Give me a second to get to my proper screen and share my screen. But that's not to say that we won't also do perhaps, Ashrei and Birkat Hamazon and other things, because there's always time for that. So anyway, don't think you're getting out of the Hebrew part of the class. Okay, so in my research about Purim, I came across this very interesting article, which is current. It was just published from a gentleman who I don't know anything about other than he writes, and his information is all accurate. But so I'm going to jump right in. This article, Purim Guide for the Perplexed, 2023. I think maybe he's written about this before. I'm not sure. At any rate, so he starts out with a quote: "Purim Fest, 1946," yelled Julius Streicher, the Nazi propaganda chief, as he approached the hanging gallows in Nuremberg. October 16, 1946, 10 convicted Nazi war criminals were hanged, just as the 10 sons of Haman were hanged in ancient Persia. I like his connection. So this gentleman who's writing it, his son-in-law's grandfather had to do with things following the Holocaust, and came across that this Streicher guy has a library full of books on Purim. So here was this Nazi war criminal, and he had a library with books on Purim. So here's the connection. Streicher assumed, so Streicher was the Nazi horrible guy, right? Assumed that the origin of the Aryan race was in Persia, with a connection to the descendants of the Amalekites, I never know how to pronounce it, who were the worst enemies of the Jewish people. He believed that Purim documented the fate of the enemies of the Jewish people. Hence, strikers yelled, "Purim Fest, 1946." So now he goes into some historical background, right? A Jewish exile to Babylonia and Persia was triggered by the destruction of the first temple in 586 before the Common Era, and the expulsion of Jews from Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria by the Babylonian emperor Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, I get that. Persia then replaced Babylon as the leading regional power. So, I'm sorry, my mouse and these pages don't go together very well. So in 538 before the Common Era, Xerxes the Great, Persia's king Ahasuerus, the successor of Darius the Great. This is the part I didn't put Xerxes and this king together as the same person. Different names depending on the language, I think. Anyway, so in this year, 538 before the Common Era, this king Ahasuerus proclaimed his support for the reconstruction of the temple and the resurrection of national Jewish life in the land of Israel. Hey, he was trying to help us, right? He didn't hate us, at least not at that time. However, so now a few years later, 499 to 449 before the Common Era, he established a coalition of countries from India to Ethiopia, which launched the Greco-Persian Wars, aiming to expand the Persian Empire westward. Persia was resoundingly defeated, and Ahasuerus' authority in Persia was gravely eroded. All right, we're going to jump into a little of our history. So Purim is a Jewish national liberation holiday, just like Passover and Hanukkah, which highlights optimism in the transition of the Jewish people from subjugation to liberty. It's celebrated 7 days following the birth and death of Moses. Okay, interesting. I didn't really put that timing together. It's celebrated when the cold and okay, we don't care about this. Okay, it's celebrated on the 14th and 15th of Adar, which ushers in happiness. So, right, the root word, Hebrew word for Adar is the adjective adir, which stands for glorious, exalted, magnificent, a derivative of the word Akkadian, or the Akkadian word, excuse me, Adora, which means heroism. Okay, so remembrance is at the core of the Purim holiday. This article is a little bit, up here, down there, all around, but we'll get to the really interesting things. The scroll of Esther, which narrates the Purim saga, is also named the Book of Remembrance. The pre-Purim Shabbat, right? So the Shabbat right before Purim is the Shabbat of Remembrance, Zachor, commemorating the deadly threat of the Amalekites, right? The ancestors of Haman, who aimed to annihilate the Jewish people, right? Following the deliverance from Egyptian bondage. So Queen Esther is our heroine for Purim. The scroll of Esther is one of the 5 biblical scrolls which are highlighted on Jewish holidays. So those 5 scrolls, the Song of Songs, Shir HaShirim on Passover, the Scroll of Ruth, which we read at Pentecost, Lamentations, right? Tisha B'Av, commemorating the destruction of the temple, and Ecclesiastes, the Feast of Tabernacles, and finally, of course, Esther's scroll, Megillat Esther on Purim. So I like what he says here. Esther, who was Mordecai's niece or cousin, symbolized the centrality of women in Judaism, as did Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, our matriarchs, Miriam, Moses' older sister, Batya, who saved Moses' life, Deborah, the prophetess, judge, and military leader, Hannah, Samuel's mother, and Yael, who killed Sisera, the Canaanite general. I'm not sure why he needed to go through all of that, but so here he gets into Esther was one of 7 biblical Jewish prophetesses, which we just talked about. Okay. Sarah lived 127 years. And interestingly, he says Esther was the queen of 127 countries. I like this next part. The name Esther was a derivative of Ishtar, the Mesopotamian goddess of beauty and fertility, as well as Stara, the Persian morning star, which is a symbol of deliverance. The name evolved into Aphrodite and Venus, the Greek and Roman goddesses of love, beauty, and fertility. I've read this in several places now in the last week. I never knew this before. Okay, so the Hebrew name of Esther was Hadassah, whose root is Hadass, meaning myrtle tree. The myrtle tree features prominently during the Feast of Tabernacles, Shavuot. It is known for its pleasant scent and humble features, including leaves in the shape of the human eye. Greek mythology identifies the myrtle tree with Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love. Okay. All right, we're going to skip some of this and go to this instead. So this is from, I can make this bigger too.
I thought it was interesting. They said the first 3 letters of Mordecai, and then you moved.
I can go back. I'll go back. So the root of his name, right?
The first 3 letters of Mordecai.
Morad, the word rebellion.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we can do more of this. Okay, so Mordecai did not bow to Haman when Haman was the second most powerful person in the empire. Mordecai was a member of the tribe of Benjamin, the only son of Jacob who did not bow to Esau. Mordecai was a descendant of King Saul, who defied a clear commandment to eradicate the Amalekites, sparing the life of Agag, the king, thus precipitating further calamities upon the Jewish people. Mordecai learned from Saul's crucial error and eliminated Haman, right? Thus sparing the Jewish people from further disaster. He then became chief advisor to the king of Persia, was to alert the assimilated Jewish community of Persia to the fact that forgetfulness and detachment from their Jewish roots would lead to oblivion, while the attachment to historic and religious roots is the foundation of growth, security, and respect for fellow human beings. Okay. The Hebrew word Purim, okay, the root of the word is fate as well as lots. So Pur are lots, like casting of lots, commemorating Haman's lottery, which determined a designated day for the annihilation of the Jewish people. It also means to frustrate or annul. Kippur, I think, is this, to crumble and to shudder. Poror. I'm not sure how to pronounce this root. At any rate, okay, so now let's go to this very interesting. So this is from Chabad. There's masses of information in here that I think is wonderful. So we've covered some of this.
Right. She was
right. So of the 24 books of the Hebrew Bible, 2 are named for women, Ruth and Esther. The book of Esther contains 10 chapters in which we uncovered the riveting story of Esther. So who wrote the book of Esther? At the end of, you may have a second. So this is actually the Megillat Esther. This is a rabbinical assembly turned it into a PowerPoint. I'm just looking for, so here at the very end, what am I on, 73? Here, at the very end, oh golly, hold on. I'm trying to find the right page. It says somewhere in here, and I apologize, I'm not finding it. It says that Esther wrote it down. All right, we can skip that part because I'm not finding it exactly.
Rachel, it just dawned on me, I'm putting this together, that my grandfather's youngest sister's name was Queen Esther.
Oh my. Now you know why.
Okay.
It's good to put these things together. Okay, so here we go. Who actually wrote the book of Esther? At first glance, it seems simple enough. Open up the Megillah and read the following 2 quotes. This is what I was looking for. I couldn't find exact spot. And Mordecai inscribed these things and sent letters to all the Jews. So this is toward the very end of the book. Now, Queen Esther, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew wrote down all the acts of power to confirm the second Purim letter. And it's definitely in there. I was just not quickly finding the right chapter and verse. The sages understand this to mean that Mordecai and Esther wrote the book of Esther together. But things are not so simple. When listing the authors of the different books of the Bible, the Talmud tells that the book of Esther was written by the Anshe Knesset Hagadolah, men of the Great Assembly, a panel of 120 prophets and sages that constituted the ultimate religious authority at the onset of the Second Temple era in the land of Israel. Now, this council was established in the Holy Land several years after the events of Purim. I have to stop doing it this way because my mouse skips, so I have to go over here. I am so sorry. Okay. Why wasn't the book of Esther written down immediately? Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, that's Rashi, explains that it needed to be written in the land of Israel because, quote, prophecy is not to be transcribed and included in the canon of scripture outside of the Holy Land. So again, who wrote the book? The simple explanation is that it was actually written twice. Esther and Mordecai recorded the story of Purim shortly after the events happened. With godly inspiration, they were able to thread together the entire story showing the divine orchestration throughout the approximately 9 years of the Purim story. That's the piece I didn't have a sense of. You know, you read these things and you know as a child, and it gets condensed and you think this all happened very quickly. It's kind of like when I was young and thinking about the Revolutionary War or the Civil War. You think it all happened very quickly, but wars don't happen quickly. They happen over a span of years. So the same here. Haman was, in power a long time, and there were 127 countries, and he wanted to kill all the Jews in all the countries. It took time for him to plan that. Okay. However, their manuscript lacked holiness. It was just a historical record of events. In fact, according to some, this is the reason the book of Esther doesn't contain any reference to God. Mordecai and Esther knew that the Persians would take this account and include it in their history books, but would substitute the name of God with the names of their own deities. They therefore decided that it was more respectful to God to just leave his name out.
Oh.
Later, Queen Esther petitioned the sages to have the book of Esther included as part of the 24 holy books of Scripture. The men of the Great Assembly then rewrote it with divine inspiration, and it was included. Only after it was rewritten by the men of the Great Assembly could we parse and expound on every nuance, such as the sizing of certain letters. Yeah, that's of less importance to me, frankly. As mentioned above, the book of Esther is unique in that God's name is absent from the entire text. At the same time, the underlying message is the hidden hand of God is active even in the darkest of moments, orchestrating the salvation of the Jewish people. Thus, in times of exile, the book of Esther is especially treasured. This is one of the reasons our sages tell us that in the Messianic era, the book of Esther will have a special significance, even more so than the other books of scriptures. Interesting. Give me 1 second. I want to go back to the page before, but I need to make this a little smaller to do that. All right, so here we were. Who wrote the book of Esther? So, under the influence of his advisor Haman, the king Ahasuerus decreed that all Jews in his expansive empire, this is it, which covered pretty much the entire known world at that time, would be slaughtered in a single day. Placing herself in grave danger, Esther petitioned the king to reverse this legislation. So we talked about this, her name, Hadassah, and all of that. Okay. Are Esther and Mordecai? Okay, so here, traditions vary about what Esther looked like. Based on the name Hadassah, some rabbis teach that Esther's skin had a greenish tone, like the color of a myrtle, but others count her among the 4 most beautiful women in the world, along with Sarah, our first matriarch, Rahab, who sheltered Joshua's spies in Jericho, and Abigail, wise wife of King David. In fact, this is also reflected in the Persian name Esther, which means morning star, since she was as beautiful as the heavenly orbs. So interesting. She was a double orphan, they say. She was raised in the home of her relative Mordecai, who took her in after her mother and father both passed away. Mordecai was the wise and learned leader of the Jewish nation at the time, and he continued to look out for her even after she was taken to the palace. Contrary to popular belief, Mordecai was Esther's first cousin, not her uncle. I was always under the impression that he was her uncle. Okay, so here, Esther was of royal lineage. She was the daughter of Abihail, son of Kish, a descendant of King Saul, whose father also bore the name Kish. So she kept her Judaism hidden. After the king Ahasuerus deposed his first queen Vashti, he was advised to collect beautiful women from throughout his empire. He spent a night with each woman before trying out the next contestant. Sounds like
Bachelorette.
Thank you. That's the word. This was before TV, so we didn't really know about it. Esther had no interest in becoming queen, but when she was taken to the harem, she had no choice. Upon the advice of Mordecai, she kept her Judaism and her royal roots a secret, even after the king chose her to be queen. In order to maintain a Jewish life, she had 7 maids. This to me is genius, and I didn't know this, each of whom served her on a different day of the week. Thus, the Shabbat maid would not notice that the queen acted any differently on that day. To keep kosher, she subsisted on seeds and other foods that were inherently kosher. We commemorate this by eating poppy-filled pastries, hamantash, on Purim. I didn't put that connection together either. So her age, while Esther is commonly depicted as a young maiden, tradition tells us that she was between the ages of 40 and 80 at the time she was taken to the palace. I had no idea of that. Upon hearing from Mordecai that the king planned to kill the Jews, she consented to approach him unbidden, a breach of palace protocol, which could have cost her life. After Mordecai assured her that he and the Jewish people would fast and pray for 3 days, she too fasted together with her maids. Miraculously, the king extended his golden scepter to her, indicating that her visit was acceptable to him. After the king showed her favor, Esther invited him and Haman to a private drinking party. At the party, she invited them both to yet another party. During the second party, Esther finally told the king she was Jewish, and Haman was scheming to kill her people. Incensed, the king had Haman killed and issued new decrees allowing the Jews to defend themselves. Okay. The day before Purim is a fast day known as Ta'anit Esther, the fast of Esther. This is one of 2 Jewish fasts bearing the name of an individual, the other being the Tzom Gedalia, fast of Gedalia, mourning the murder of Gedaliah, last governor of post-First Temple Judea. So the Talmud lists 7 prophetesses, which we've mentioned already. When we read that Esther donned her royal garb, the sages explain that to mean that she enwrapped herself in divine inspiration, thus giving us the notion that she earned, her position as a prophet. This I didn't know about. So her son was Cyrus. Even after life returned to normal for the Jews of the empire, Esther remained tragically imprisoned, married to an idolatrous king. The Midrash states that King Darius was the son of Esther. According to the Talmud, Darius is the same as Cyrus, the king who allowed the second temple to be built in Jerusalem. Through feeding her husband the forbidden fruit, Eve introduced death into the world. When the Jews ate at King Ahasuerus's non-kosher party, they brought death upon themselves. Esther rectified this when she called for a 3-day fast. Her soul also belonged to Yael, the brave woman who killed the enemy general Sisera. They both accomplished their victory by serving food to their enemies. Yael gave the exhausted general milk, and Esther invited Haman to party with her and the king, and then neutralizing them. So interesting stuff. I see there are things in the chat that I didn't look at. Okay, so let's, so Marlene shares with us, give me a second to see if I can, interesting personal family story. I chose my son Jordan Ira's one Hebrew name, Yital, with a Lamed, from a baby book of Hebrew names written and edited by an Israeli. He was named in memory of my late father, Irving Ostro, of blessed memory, and his Hebrew name was Yitzhak. I learned from my friend, I know Andrea Ebert, yes, who lives in Israel, from her Orthodox yeshiva-trained older brother, that the name Yitzhak is a derivative of the Hebrew verb yitzhala, which means to exalt and be joyous. The verb is actually found in the very end of the book of Esther. The verb refers to the greatest amount of joy that was experienced when all of the Jews were saved by Esther. That's lovely. Really. Thank you. Okay. So I was going to go. Oh, so here we are. We're back to my first page. Let's see what time it is. 9:30. Common Purim myths and misconceptions. All right, so this is the one that Mordecai was her uncle, not her first cousin. Okay, we've kind of covered that.
Is that where the song "My Hat It Had Three Corners"? Three corners.
Yes.
Of my hat.
Yes, I certainly think so. Although there are other three-cornered hats that people, like certain in colonial times, they wore three-cornered hats. So, okay.
Prefer because there's a lot of stuff in the news about poppy.
As in poppy seeds?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. There is no evidence suggesting that Haman had a three-cornered hat, nor any credible tradition about his ears. Okay. In fact, the pastry's most important feature is not its shape, but the traditional filling, right? Called man in Yiddish. That's what we always called it, man. Eating seeds on Purim recalls the devotion of Daniel and later Esther, who subsisted on seeds while living in royal surroundings to avoid eating anything not kosher. So man or poppy is preferred because it is. Oh, okay. So the meaning of manot, portions, which we send each other as part of the Purim celebration. Okay. Mishloach manot, portions. So why are the hamantashen sometimes called ears? Well, oznaim, ears, can sometimes refer to non-Purim pastries. In describing the manna which fell from heaven while the Jews were in the desert, both this rabbi and this other rabbi described a pastry called oznaim, with no mention of Haman or Purim at all. And they're stuffed dumplings. They have stuffed dumplings in Europe. Okay, Eastern European stuffed dumplings called little ears. Okay. A major focal point of the Megillah is the part where we read of Haman and his 10 sons being strung up on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. When asked how Haman's sons died, many people would probably answer hanging. A careful reading of chapters 8 and 9 tell us that the king ordered Haman to be strung up on the tree he had prepared for Mordecai immediately after the plot was discovered. His sons' deaths, however, took place nearly a year later, on the 13th of Adar, when they were killed by sword among all other enemies in the city of Shushan. Only after they were dead did the king give permission to have their bodies hung on a gallows. They were thus hung but not hanged. Well, also, I believe Haman was impaled on this giant pole that he had put up for Mordecai. So, I'm pretty darn certain of that. Here it is. When Esther came before the king, he ordered, with this written instruction, let the plan he devised, so Haman's plan, for the Jews recoil on his own head, and they impaled him and his sons on the stake. So he was definitely, maybe after they hung him, they put him up on this stake. Interesting. It's hard to read these things, just from the words and not getting the history and the commentary. Okay, so there are 4 mitzvot that are associated with Purim. One of them, so one is listening to the Megillah, giving gifts to the poor and feasting. So you have these mishloach manot, at least 2 portions of food. The source for mishloach manot is in the Megillah. Mordecai enjoined the Jews to make the 14th day of the month of Adar feasting and joy, and sending portions one to another and gifts to the poor. So it's written right in the book. A common go ahead.
I'm sorry. So you're saying this, I've heard it Megillah.
Oh, Megillah is the Hebrew pronunciation. Megillah is the English way we say Megillah. Yes, same word, Megillah.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
And Geraldine,
And sometimes you hear the phrase, people who, like over the years, use the word Megillah just to refer to like a play or a book. But it's the Megillat Esther is the Hebrew pronunciation. Okay. Someone else, Marcia, someone else have a comment?
Well, a Yiddish expression, the ganze Megillah, which you're telling the whole story.
Exactly. All right, Marlene offers again, one contemporary interpretation suggests that the shape of the Hamantashen, not about the ears, but something else. Might be a reference to a woman's genitalia. I would rather
go with the hat.
I agree. Let's not go there. But yes, I saw that too. Whatever. In those days, they probably didn't even know what women's reproductive organs look like, much less shape of them. So, all right, where were we? Gifts to the poor. A common misconception propagated by preschool teachers and others is that the two portions must warrant distinct blessings. So this is the difference between giving gifts to one another and gifts to the poor. So gifts to one another are the Mishloach Manot. Gifts to the poor is another name, Avoyalim. I'm going to mess up the Hebrew word for it. But this is saying that you can just say the one bracha mizonot, which is fine. This mouse is just okay. The halacha, the rule, the law is that one must send 2 food portions, but they can be of the same blessing. Yes, I was taught when you do mishloach manot, I don't know if your synagogues do it, they usually have a couple of different things inside the basket or the container, because the whole idea of 2 food portions. So, we would do hamantashen and maybe candy and maybe dried fruit. We would have different distinct items in there so there were at least 2, if not 3 distinct items to fulfill the notion of 2 food portions. And they're saying that they can be the same kind. You can still, so long as you count them, the fact that they get the same bracha doesn't change things, okay? So we don't need to get into that. Myth, everyone needs to get drunk. I think, didn't we talk about this last week? We certainly know you don't have to. The sages say that a person should drink on Purim to the point that they don't discern between cursed be Haman and blessed be Mordechai. Some take this quite literally and drink so much wine that they lose awareness of their surroundings. In some communities, especially among the young, people may feel pressure to drink so much they act inappropriately. Yeah, well. Okay. Here we go. Myth. One Megillah reading is enough. Wait. One of the 4 Purim mitzvahs is to listen to the Megillah being read in Hebrew from a handwritten parchment scroll. The other 3 mitzvot, sending food portions, giving gifts to the poor, and enjoying a feast, are all done only on Purim day. The Megillah, however, is read once at night and then again the next day. There is a popular misconception that hearing it once is enough. Well, some of us have to work. So here, the sages of the Talmud tell us that we need to hear the Megillah twice. Okay. Are there questions or other things you want to talk about with this?
I have a very scholarly point to make.
Yes, of course. Do we all need to stop our laughter already before you make it?
When I was little, there was a show on TV called Megillah Gorilla. Does anyone remember that?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm guessing that it was a Jewish producer, but I have no idea.
Well,
Okay.
I think you should find out for us. I think that would be a good thing for you to research. Thank you for bringing that up.
Is Purim celebrated in Israel 1 day or 2 days?
The evening and the morning.
Evening and the morning.
1 day.
Yeah. So it's
So
really
one
one full
day.
day.
1 day.
They read it in the
So
evening.
they can
and
read it twice. Yeah.
Right,
got it.
exactly.
Yeah.
But you don't read Torah in the evening, right? Torah is read in the morning, and Shacharit and Mincha. But here we're reading a scroll in the evening. So it's a divergence from how we would do the Torah. Other questions, thoughts, comments? Well, I hope that deep dive into Purim was enlightening.
Great.
Period.
Thank you, Marlene.
Well, I have to say, I was looking at some things because I'm on this diversity inclusion. And yesterday I ran across an article. I guess I went from one article to the next to the next. And it's sort of, this was called, this Purim is the Purim, a space for queer Jews to celebrate their identities and dance. And apparently they had it a few years ago, but for young people to come out and celebrate their identities and stuff. So, but Marlene, when I went just to see, I think it's in New York, I went to see, I went all the way down to the end of the page, and I was taken back by the little advertisement they had, that the little icon for the picture that they had, because it does represent a woman's
Uterus.
Okay.
No, it's the pubic triangle. They wouldn't know what was going on inside. It's just like, like from the belly button down. It's just like a general representation of female as opposed to ears. But that's just, somebody's.
No, if you saw this, you would go, whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, that's what I'm saying. Okay. So, yeah, interesting.
So, I have a visual memory of, and I thought it was Purim, of Hasidic men being publicly drunken in the streets, but it was in their neighborhood right outside their shul, and they were dancing, but they were so drunk they could barely stand up unless somebody was holding them up. So, and apparently that was okay. Not safe, not a good idea, but anyway. All right, ladies.
Rachel?
Yeah?
So what is shalach? Because in our synagogue, it's shalach.
Oh, so shalach manas?
Yeah,
So that is not Hebrew. So that, I believe, is Yiddish for mishloach manot, shalach manas. It's just, and I'm not sure if it's pure Yiddish or not. One can, I'm not that good at Yiddish. But it's another way to say mishloach manot.
Okay. I assumed, but I didn't know how we got there.
Yes.
And
so,
also, because Yiddish is so close to German, this is no surprise, but back in 1975, when I was in Austria and Germany, my friend was not Jewish, is not Jewish. We went to a little cafe and they sold something, and the word was mun. And I said, are there poppy seeds there? And the answer was yes. So yeah.
Right. And nowadays it's virtually impossible to find hamantashen with mun filling, poppy seed filling. Nobody. Yeah, Susan, you know someone making it?
Greens makes poppy seed.
Okay, well,
Wait,
so
say that again.
Greens babka in New York.
I believe that. That's so traditional. So, here I haven't been able to find prune or poppy seed hamantashen. When I was growing up, that's all we had, prune or poppy seed.
Okay.
My sister loved the poppy seed and I loved the prune. And now everything else you can think of is stuffed inside a Hamantaschen, but not the traditional things. And I saw recently, I saw a recipe for fig filled, which is the closest I can think of to the mun. Yeah, Susan.
There on Facebook, somebody posted a cannoli Hamantaschen recipe.
Okay, well, certainly I have from several years back a cheesecake Hamantaschen recipe that I sent to my girlfriend who makes every kind of cheesecake you can think of, and they are just one more delicious than the next. So sure, why not? Okay.
Last year, our person who does a lot of food demonstrations and stuff invited me to her house to pick up some different types. And let me tell you, and you can share this with your father. I did not share one of them with him.
You like them.
So certainly chocolate, Nutella, you name it, they make it. And to me, the key to Hamantaschen is not so much about the filling as it is about the crust. But, you know, there are lots of now different recipes for, I like to think of it more as a cross between pie dough and cookie dough, but there are so many recipes out there, right? Some of them are super heavy. They're like, you know, like the difference between a matzo ball, the really light matzo ball and the really heavy ones. The same can be said, I think, of Hamantaschen dough. So.
Well, I just saw an article where now they're coloring the dough. So they have like a dough, multicolor for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
So where's the tradition?
You know, it's like multicolor challah, right? They do that too.
Right.
Which I have to be honest that once you color the challah dough, I don't think it's appetizing anymore. It just doesn't look right.
Right.
So, okay. All right. So, let's practice Ashrei, girls. Yeah, I'm not giving you a choice. Let me share my screen. Okay. Let me make it big. Oops, I changed. I did not mean to change screens, but I can fix this. Where's the other one? Here it is. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm not going to call on Marlene because she's sick. If anyone else does not want to be called on, just let me know and I will skip you. But Lorraine, will you start us? You can either sing or read and, you know, do 2 lines, but if you want to do more, do more.
Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha, O Yehalalucha Selah. Ashrei Ha'am Shechacha Lo. Ashrei Ha'am She'Adonai Eloha.
Perfect. You know, I'm going to change my own instructions. You read 2, then I'll sing the 2 and we'll move on. So you read them beautifully. I will chant them. Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha, Od Yehalalucha Selah. Ashrei Ha'am Shekacha Lo. Ashrei Ha'am She'Adonai Elohav. Audrey, will you keep reading?
Hilo le David, Aro Nimcha Elohai, HaMelech Ve'abarcha Shimka Leolam Va'ed. Bechol Yom Avar Checha Be'o Be'ah, Hallelujah, Shamcha, Simcha, Leolam Ba'ed.
Very nice. Thank you. Tehillah leDavid, Aromimcha Elohai HaMelech, Va'avarcha Shimcha Leolam Ba'ed, Bechol Yom Avarchecha, Va'ahala Shimcha Leolam Ba'ed. Okay, Geraldine, will you unmute and continue reading?
I was just getting warmed up too. Gadol Adonai Kula Me'od Meligdulato in Lador.
Marcia, will you mute because we can hear background
Oh, I'm
noise.
sorry.
It's okay.
Lador Yishabak Maiseka or Seka Uroteka Yagidu.
Beautiful. Let me just check the chat. What's happening?
No, not important.
Not important?
Yeah.
Okay. Fine. Okay. I'm going to chant now. Let's see. Gadol Adonai Uhulam Me'od. Veligdulato Ein Cheker. Am I in the right spot? Yes. Dor Lador Yishabak Ma'asecha. Uvarotecha Yagidu. Okay. Susan, will you continue at Hadar?
Adar Kivod Ho Recha Ho Decha the Divrei Nif Lo Techa Asi
Keep going.
Ve'ez Zuz Nor Ro Techa Yo Meru Ugdula Latcha Asa Asap Rechnu.
Nah.
Asap Rechnu. Nah.
Nah. Good. Thank you. Hadar kevod hodecha, v'divrei niflotecha asicha, ve'ezuz norotecha yomeru, ugdulatcha asaprena. Okay, Edith, will you pick up with Zecher?
Zecher Rav Tuvcha Yabi U Vizit Katka Yaravnenu Kanon Bera Kum Adonai Erek I Apayim Ugdal Chased.
Exactly.
Chased.
Good job. Zecher Rav Tuvcha Yabi'u, Betzidkatcha Yiranenu, Chanun V'rachum Adonai, Erech Apayim Ugdal Chased. All right, I got to see where we are, ladies. Marlene, I'm skipping you. Marcia, is it quiet? Would you like to go?
Yeah, it's good time.
Okay.
Starting with Tov.
Tov, yes.
Tov Adonai Lekal Barachamav Al Kal Ma'asav. Your picture is covering that.
I'm sorry.
Let me see. Barachamav. No.
Yoducha.
Yeah, the first letter is your picture's over it. Whatever.
Is that better?
There we go. Yeah.
Okay.
Yoduka Adonai Kal Ma'asecha Mahasidecha Yavar Viva.
Chucha.
Vuva. Oh,
Good.
Kucha.
Chucha. Okay. Tov Adonai lakol barachamav al kol ma'asav. Yoducha Adonai kol ma'asecha v'chasidecha yevarchucha. Excellent. Next page. There we go. Who's chatting us? Okay. Thank you, Susan. Take care. Okay. So we're at the top, kavod. And Audrey, would you read?
Kavod malchutecha yo meru ug vuratcha
Techa.
yada beru leho dia leave ne ha'adam gavurotan
Tav.
Ukvod hadar melakuto. Malkuto.
Perfect. Lovely. Kevod malchutecha yomeru ugvuratacha yedaberu lehodia lifnei ha'adam gavurotav uchvod hadar malchuto. Okay. Geraldine, will you go again? Oh, wait, Lenore, did I skip you?
I didn't have a turn.
I apologize. That's your picture moved on me. All right, so Lenore, would you start with Malchutecha?
Malchutecha, Malchut, Hal, Olamim, Umem, Shal, Techa, Hall, Dar, Vidor. So make Adonai little hall ha novim the zohe the hall ha hakfuvim.
Beautiful. I'm going to chant it. Malchutecha, Malchut kol olamim, umem shaltecha, b'chol dor v'ador, somech Adonai l'chol hanoflim, v'zokef l'chol hakfufim. I'm going to keep chanting, okay, because it's almost 10. Einei chol elecha yisaberu, ve'ata noten lahem, et achlam be'ito, poteach et yadecha, umaspia lechol chayratzon, tzadik Adonai bechol drachav, v'chasid bechol ma'asav, karov Adonai lechol korav, lechol asher yikra'uhu ve'emet, Ritzon Yure'av Ya'aseh, Ve'et Shav'atam Yishma V'yoshiem, Shomer Adonai et kol Ohavav, Ve'et kol Harshaim Yashmid, Tehillat Adonai Yedaber Pi, V'yivarech kol basar Shem Kadsho Leolam Va'ed, Va'anachnu nivarech ya me'ata v'ad olam. Hallelujah. All right. Well, we are ready for Purim. We are pretty good at Ashrei. And And we might start preparing for Pesach starting next week. I have to decide how many weeks we really need. But apparently Purim always comes exactly, I forget how many days, but essentially 4 weeks before Pesach, because the notion is we need this preparatory time, and it puts us in the mindset of now we must prepare. So regardless of what you see in your stores, I actually saw them putting out Passover stuff right after Valentine's Day. I wanted to shoot myself. The Jewish calendar has a slightly different timing involved, and I'm sure it had nothing to do with preparing the food that far in advance. So, anywho, that's my little
well,
spiel.
if your kitchen hasn't been prepared for Passover, what's the point?
What's the point? Precisely. Unless you're one of these unusual people, I know a few who have a second kitchen that is only used for Pesach.
No way.
Oh, yes. So my father's aunt had a separate kitchen she only used for Pesach. And I know a woman here who lives not far from me. She's a member of my shul. She has a second kitchen in her basement that she only uses for Pesach.
That's wonderful.
That's